Hi, this is Christine. I'm back with you for the second part of a two-part webinar on helping your child learn to read at home. This webinar is intended for parents who are supporting their children, so typically children in kindergarten, grade 1, and some grade 2 children, or in the British curriculum in FS2 and year 2, in learning how to read at this critical time. Currently, 500 million children are out of school, more than 500 million children actually are out of school around the world. And there are certain things that if your child is at that early stage of learning to read, you would probably want to support them with at home that are hard to do online with an app or through distance learning. So having said that, I did just share our favorite apps. If you are interested in watching this webinar, I would suggest that you start with the first video and then move on to this video. So we're going to just jump right back in. The next suggestion was to schedule quiet reading time on a daily basis. So this is one of my favorite parts of helping children learn to read. It's getting to just relax and read myself. And you can see that's what this mom is doing. It's not me, but she's sitting down. She's got Michelle Obama's book. She's got a cup of coffee. She even has fresh flowers. That's amazing. What she does not have is a phone in her hand. Like most moms around the world, when I get some time to relax, I do love sitting down and checking my messages. But when you're doing quiet reading time, you really want to be modeling reading. And most children will see you with a phone and think you're playing games. Now, you might not be. You might actually be reading online. But you want to just make that super clear to them. So it's a really perfect time for you to take a book off of the shelf and sit down and give yourself an opportunity to unwind. At the same time, for early stage readers, you might want to present them with a basket of books. Although you wouldn't begin with 20 minutes per day, ultimately you want the child to sustain reading for 20 minutes, though many children won't have the attention to sustain reading a single book for that time. Also, very early stage readers may not be reading every word, but might be trying to make up the story using the pictures as they read. So giving a child a basket of familiar, relatable books is a helpful way of helping them stay engaged. And here you can see some great books. We've got 10 Apples up on top. This is an easily decodable book. It also has great illustrations for reading words like apples that are a little bit less easily decodable. And then one of my favorites of all time, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. And this is the legendary tale of a caterpillar who's quite hungry and eats through some delicious food like cake and a pickle and an ice cream cone, and I think there's even a lollipop. And I'm not going to give away the ending for anyone who hasn't read it, but highly recommend this book. It also has, in addition to gorgeous illustrations, repeated text, which can help your child with learning sight words and also learning patterns as they read. So in addition to just modeling reading through quiet reading time, we highly recommend that you read aloud to your child. Now here, it is fine to read off of a tablet. And in fact, in light of the fact that we can't get out right now to bookstores or to libraries, it's great that we have tablets because we're able to have a steady stream of content or books to read to our children that way. So you could do this through a Kindle reader, for example, but you also can access free books through childrenslibrary.org. Childrenslibrary.org has thousands of titles in hundreds or at least over 100 different languages. So when you read aloud, you're modeling comprehension and you're helping your child understand that reading is a form of thinking. You may do that through making predictions. You make predictions and say them out loud when you're reading the text and invite your child to do the same. You might make connections. So connections to other books that you've read, connections to your own life experiences, or connections to things happening in the world. And again, invite your child to do the same or to give their feedback on the connections that you're making. You might also make some inferences about how characters are feeling and ask your child how they think characters are feeling as they're reading. This helps them really start to associate the idea of reading with the idea of thinking, rather than just simply trying to get through a book, which can sometimes be the case with early stage readers. We'll go back to structured reading a little bit later, and I'll move on now to some of the supplies that you might want to have on hand for helping your child learn how to read. So these are letter cards. You can certainly download letter cards through a resource like Teachers Pay Teachers. I'm sure there's some free ones online too, but it's quite easy to make your own. And letter cards are really key because that enables you to help your child kind of manipulate sounds as they're learning to blend. So in this case, you have BAP. Right, and so you've got 3 sounds making the word app. So you might notice that I barely said the and the p. That's because those are tap sounds or bounce sounds. You don't elongate those sounds. And so many of us were taught ourselves to say ba and pa. But for children who might have more difficulty learning to read, that can be quite confusing. If you sound out the word that way, you sound it out as ba, ap, pa, which is ba'apa, not bap. You can also then replace letter cards with another one. So you might put an L at the beginning and have lap. You might put a C before the L and have clap. So it starts helping the child pay attention to what happens in, say, a word family, so words that have app at the ending, or how different letters can be manipulated to make new words. You can make these on index cards. Index cards are a great reading tool. You can even make letter cards out of sandpaper. So cutting the letters out of sandpaper and letting the child trace them with their finger. Other good supplies to have on hand include dry erase boards and markers, magnetic letters, sight word flashcards. You can easily make your own. And those include commonly repeated words like is, are, she, her. If you just Google sight words, you'll find lists and lists of them. And of course, it's really helpful to have lots and lots of books. So you saw how particular I was about the way I was blending the sounds and the way I pronounced essentially the sounds as I was blending them. We'll all have different pronunciations depending on where you're from, but it is really helpful to know which sounds are bounce sounds or tap sounds, so those short sounds, and which sounds are stretch sounds. That will help your child blend, and it's a way, simply by knowing that you can help your child learn to blend words. And in all honesty, I wasn't taught this when I learned to become a teacher. It was something one of my mentors taught me in my first year of teaching. So if you just Google, how to blend words, you will come up with plenty of videos that can take you through what sounds different letters make for blending. Even we had the controversial QU at the beginning of this. TH can be a tricky one. So some people will say it makes the sound. I find it's actually easiest to pronounce TH when you're blending as th. But, you have a look at a few different videos because there some various ways of pronouncing some of the sounds for blending. Find what works best for you, but the most important thing is to know which sounds are stretch sounds and which sounds are tap or bounce sounds. Multisensory techniques are a great way of helping your child really remember and retrieve letter sounds. So there are a few examples here using the word cat. So sand writing is where the child simply writes the word in the sand, sounding out the sounds for the word and then blending them together at the end. So as they trace the letters in the sand, they might, or make the letters in the sand, the child might say at, cat. And in this sense, they're actually triggering 3 different senses. So visual, certainly, auditory, and they're and also kinesthetic or touch. So the more senses you're activating, the easier it is for the child to recall or remember the letter sounds when they come across them again. Word making is another effective way of practicing reading in a multisensory environment. So in this case, you're looking at read it, build it, write it. So the child would read a word, they build it, in this case, with letter magnets, but you could also do it with letter cards, and then the child can practice writing it. They can write it in the sand, they can air write it, they can finger write it in their hands or on somebody else's back. And then the last suggestion here is tapping words. So that's where, so for the a word like cat, you would have 3 fingers up. You would tap your finger when you say a sound, and then bring your fingers together to make the word. So tapping out, at, bringing your fingers together and making cat. We do have a couple of online free courses that you can use that take you through these multisensory techniques in more detail. But I wanted to share with you what you can do for multisensory reading practice. So normally if you're going to do this, we would recommend doing around 3 structured literacy mini lessons per week. I think I said multisensory when I was just introducing this. What I meant to say was structured. Apologies for that. And you would do so by starting with a sound drill, possibly progressing onto a new rule, and then practicing it at the sound level, the word level, and the sentence level, and then wrapping up possibly with some of the multisensory activities. So with this, you might start with doing some nonsense words. Now, nonsense words are also controversial. I think what's most important is that you just let the child know that these are nonsense words, especially if they're second language learners. And the reason I use nonsense words is because if you want the child to really be decoding, you don't want it to be a case of them recalling words that they've previously memorized. There's a place for that, but not when you're practicing decoding. So the child would then decode crasp, crasp, drump, drump, quig, quig. After reading through the list by sounding it out, then they would read through it a second time. Next, you would introduce a new sound. So in this case, it's CK making a K sound. They can air write it, sand write it on their hand, write it on a paper 5 times while making the sound. Then make a list of words with the CK pattern with the child. If you're stuck, you can always Google list of words with CK pattern. And again, we have a free online course if you want some support with knowing what letter sounds are and what order they should be introduced in. And then let the child, so now they've experienced it on the sound level and on the word level. After they review the words that they just made on the list, then bring them through the sentence level. So in this case, we have a story where you're going to see a whole bunch of CK words. It's the story of our happy duck who likes to quack and wants a snack, but then has a problem. So take a minute to read the story yourself, because I will ask you comprehension questions. When you do this, you would probably read one sentence at a time. Let the child read the sentence by decoding or recalling sight words word by word, and then read the sentence through. Then give them a minute to read the story, start to finish silently 1 or 2 times, and then ask the child to read it back to you once they're done. After they read it to you, then ask them a few comprehension questions. What does the duck do when she's happy? Hopefully you remember, she quacks. What does the duck want? Well, she wants a snack. What is the problem? Problem is the farmer has gone to sleep. How do you think the duck can solve the problem? So we wrap up here with an inferential question. This invites the child to think about perhaps what they would do if they were the duck. And the answer we get from children and adults most often with this story is that the duck can quack louder to wake the farmer up. So that's just one example of a structured literacy mini lesson. You can do a lesson like that with your child in 10 minutes. But doing it on a regular basis really, really helps them with building the decoding and ultimately the fluency skills that they need. Shoot us an email if you'd like to enroll in any of our free online courses or if you'd like any additional information or resources. We're here to help you.